I'll demonstrate creating a crocheted hem for a loom knitted hat on this baby hat. But I want you to know the technique works for adult hats, any size of hats. Here's the finished hat on a life-size doll. The finished circumference is 12 inches. Typical newborn head circumference is 13 inches, so that's just a little bit of negative ease. The model doll actually has a head circumference of 15. It's not really a newborn. And while the hat does fit, if I were actually knitting for a child this size, I would add 4 stitches. I don't really think that a lot of negative ease is ideal on an infant hat. With the row count that I give you, the total hat length will be 5 inches tall when finished, although you can certainly alter that simply by adding or subtracting rows. The hat pattern is for a 1/2 inch gauge Cindwood X loom. The method of adding the crochet hem doesn't require any particular gauge or any particular loom, so you can take the concept and use it with any loom you enjoy. I use number 4 yarn, the U-wrap form of the knit stitch, for this pattern and get 4 stitches, 6 rows per inch. So to get the identically sized hat, you do need to match that gauge and that yarn. To knit the hat, begin by E-wrapping 44 pegs and then go straight into stockinette knitting. Knit 18 plain rows before working any decreases. All decreases are worked in the same manner. Every stitch that is adjacent to one of the sliding wedges needs to be moved inwards towards the center of the loom. The peg it lands on will now hold 2 stitches. When those are all moved, loosen the wing nuts on the bottom of the loom. Slide each of the movable wedges towards the center so that it aligns with the pegs that now hold the end stitches, and tighten all of the wedges back up. Here are the decreases on a finished hat crown. For this pattern, we'll knit 2 rows and then decrease again every single time. Every time we decrease, the end peg will hold 2 stitches rather than 1, and both should be knitted over on the first round of knitting after the decrease. The number of pegs being worked decreases by 8 stitches every time we make a decrease. And eventually we end up with only 12 pegs holding stitches. Knit 2 rounds on those last 12 pegs, then snip the yarn, leaving at least a 12-inch tail, thread it into a yarn needle, and lift each stitch off of the loom and onto the yarn tail. Here's the hat crown showing the decreases but not fully drawn in yet. Draw in that yarn tail tightly. Stitch across the O a couple of times for security. Then poke the yarn tail through to the inside of the hat, weave it in, and snip off the excess. So we're done with knitting, now we're going to crochet. For worsted weight, number 4 yarn, I use a G-hook, also known as a 6 or a 4 millimeter. We're going to work into the E-wraps, and there are a lot of ways that you could do this. Here's my favorite. An E-wrap surrounds the peg, so there are effectively 2 strands of yarn involved, and they cross. That's the nature of the E-wrap cast-on. I like to stick the hook in where those 2 strands of yarn cross. Work a single crochet into the first 2 stitches like that. That was 1, here comes 2. Knit stitches don't take up as much width as crochet stitches, so we can't just use 44 crochet stitches. Therefore, we work a decrease over the next 2 E-wraps. And for the first round of crocheting, we'll keep repeating the pattern we just did. 1 single crochet into stitch 1, a single crochet into stitch 2, work a decrease over stitches 3 and 4, and repeat. Slip stitch and chain 1 to close the round, and then work another round of single crochets, this time 1 single crochet into every one of the single crochets on the row below. From this point, you can get as fancy as you want. It usually takes at least 1 more row to completely stop the edge from rolling. For this size of hat, we want at least 1 inch for the crocheted part of the band. So after this second round of single crochet, this time one into every stitch, slip stitch to close and chain one. And from then you can decide what to do. One thing that I like to do and will do here is a round of single crochet into the back loop only. I learned this from a friend from South America, and the effect that single crochet back loop only has is very harmonious with knitting. It almost looks as though you knitted a band on sideways. Let me emphasize that there's plenty of room for creativity here. Any crochet stitches that you like the looks of and enjoy creating may be used. The main things to take away from this are that the edge can be creative and that you do need to work decreases into the first round of single crochet to make your crocheting and your knitting match up. Also, even for an infant hat, you need at least an inch of crocheting. And the hook should be 1 or 2 sizes smaller than you would probably use for the body of a hat if crocheting with the same yarn. I would use an I or 5mm hook with this yarn for the main portion of a hat. When you have done all of the length of crocheting you want, you may prefer to run an additional round of slip stitch to firm up the edge. In this yarn and this size of hat, I didn't find it to be necessary. Here's a little trick. I had 2 yarn tails, one from starting the knitting, one from starting the crocheting. I wove them in automatically by crocheting around them, and now I can just snip them off. This round of back loop only single crochet was my last one. So I am now closing the round, pulling the yarn tail through after I snip it, and I'll weave it in. Here's a close look at how the back loop only technique aligns the stitches so that they look as though they were sideways knitted. If you have multiple fiber crafting skills, why not combine them?